When white people in the United States balk at the idea of paying reparations to Black Americans who descended from slaves, they disagree with the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that reparations are not only a matter of justice and equity, but also a reflection of God's character and values. In the Bible, we see numerous examples of God's concern for the oppressed, the marginalized, and the downtrodden.
I can't be racist. I have black friends. Sure, you probably don't see black people as objects, but you're refusing to accept the role our people have had in their oppression. That guilt we feel is our responsibility for the actions of our ancestors. It's why white people refuse to say that black people deserve reparation, because it admits our guilt.
Some people already got reparations. White people. White enslavers were paid for losing their human property. The actual people who were raped, tortured, whipped, and sold, and worse, were promised land to get a fresh start after the war, but they got nothing.
When white people in the United States balk at the idea of paying reparations to Black Americans who descended from slaves, they disagree with the Bible. Reparations are a form of compensation or restitution made to those who have suffered injustice, particularly those in cases of racial inequality, discrimination, and slavery. The idea of paying reparations to Black Americans is not a new one. It has been a topic of discussion for decades, if not centuries. However, it has gained renewed attention and support in recent years, following the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the growing recognition of systemic racism in American society. As a Christian, I believe that reparations are not only a matter of justice and equity, but also a reflection of God's character and values. In the Bible, we see numerous examples of God's concern for the oppressed, the marginalized, and the downtrodden. From the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt to the ministry of Jesus among the poor and the outcast, we see a consistent theme of God's love for those who are on the margins of society. One of the key biblical principles that underlie the idea of reparations is the concept of restitution. In the book of Leviticus, we see God commanding the Israelites to make restitution to those whom they have wronged. Leviticus 6, 1-5 says, "If anyone sins and commits a breach of faith against the Lord by deceiving his neighbor in a matter of deposit or security or through robbery, or if he has oppressed his neighbor or has found something lost and lied about it, swearing falsely in any of all the things that people do and sin thereby, if he has sinned and has realized his guilt and will restore what he took by robbery when he got it by oppression or deposit that was committed to him, or the lost thing that he found, or anything about which he has sworn falsely, he shall restore in full and shall add a fifth to it, and give it to him to whom it belongs on the day that he realizes his guilt." This passage emphasizes the importance of making restitution to those who have been wronged, and not just restoring what was taken, but adding to it as a form of compensation. This principle of restitution can be applied to the issue of reparations to Black Americans who have suffered centuries of enslavement, discrimination, and systemic oppression. Another biblical principle that supports the idea of reparations is the concept of Jubilee. In Leviticus 25, God commands the Israelites to observe a Jubilee every 50th year, during which all debts are forgiven, all slaves to be set free, and all property to be returned to its original owners. This was a radical idea of economic justice designed to prevent the accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of a few, and to ensure that all members of society had equal access to resources and opportunities. The idea of Jubilee can be seen as a model for reparations in that it seeks to address the root causes of inequality and oppression rather than just treating the symptoms. By forgiving debts, freeing slaves, and returning property, Jubilee seeks to create a more just and equitable society, one in which everyone has the opportunity to flourish. As a Christian, I believe paying reparations to Black Americans is only a matter of justice and equity, but also it is a reflection of God's values and character. Through the biblical principles of restitution and Jubilee, we see a model for how we can address the historical and systemic injustices that have plagued our society for far too long. While the issue of reparations is complex and contentious, I believe that as Christians, we have a responsibility to seek justice.
White people throughout American history are almost always seen on the side of the oppressors. Not all white people, but most of us. And this sucks to learn. It's even harder to internalize. And it's why white people usually don't accept this, because it makes us feel a deep sense of guilt. I think it's why white people say nonsense like, I can't be racist, I have black friends. Sure, you probably don't see black people as objects, but you're refusing to accept the role our people have had in their oppression. That guilt we feel is our responsibility for the actions of our ancestors. It's why white people refuse to say that black people deserve reparation, because it admits our guilt. But black people deserve reparations. It just makes sense logically. You can sue someone for scratching your car, but black people can't sue the American government for the enslavement of their people. My people are arresting and deporting Mexican families from this country. Think about that. We are telling people that they are not allowed on the land we stole. Let's go a step further. White people stole a sacred land site from the people indigenous to this land and then carved 4 white people's faces on it, most of which were slave owners. I mean, Mount Rushmore is a place that we look at and we're like, oh, cool, giant faces. But to other people, it's a giant form of oppression. And admitting that and coming to terms with that sucks. We suck, dude. My people really and truly suck. Not all of us contributed to this oppression, but we are all a part of it. And this will mostly sound like virtue signaling. It will mostly sound like, look at how rough we are. But there is a reality to admitting this guilt and being honest with it. Because white people are afraid to do this. And we're afraid to admit it because my people are weak. White people are weak. We have power we have given ourselves and put down the cultures that are stronger than us because we know that we're weak. If white Americans were oppressed the same way black, native, or Mexican American people are, we would crack like glass. Our culture and identity as white people is so meaningless that we do everything in our power to keep other people down so that we don't break from having someone else on top. I think that's why you see white Americans championing white pride, not just out of ignorance or racism, but it's because they are scared. They're scared to come to terms with their guilt, scared to admit they're wrong, and terrified to acknowledge that we may have all the societal, economic, and political power, but as a people we are weak. But this isn't the way it has to be forever. I have hope that one day my people will finally take responsibility for what we have done. I hope that we'll collectively accept our role in the oppression of our non-white brothers and sisters and finally take action. And it will take the action of us white folks. It's not just non-white people that have to fight for their rights. It's us too fighting for them because our cross to bear is being born white. Being born with the skin color of the oppressors means that we have to fight to be nothing like them. We're not near that right now. America is in a tumultuous stage where it very much does not feel like white people are acknowledging where they went wrong. But I want to have hope, and I refuse to accept that one day justice won't prevail. Collectively, we can all shed the shadow of oppression and share this place together. And that's the message I want to end with. I want to be hopeful that one day oppression will be something taught in history class, something that we don't have to see ourselves in. That's what I hope. Anyway, I want to be optimistic in the end. Anyway, that's it. Thanks.
I've never owned anyone. My neighbors, as far as I know, have never been owned by anyone. But the people who say we don't owe any reparations for the Civil War are ignoring something really huge. Or maybe they just don't know. Some people already got reparations. White people. White enslavers were paid for losing their human property. The actual people who were raped, tortured, whipped, and sold, and worse, were promised land to get a fresh start after the war, but they got nothing. When slavery was abolished, Congress paid nearly $1 million, which is 30 million in today's bucks, to white enslavers as compensation for losing their property in a war they lost. If a freed person didn't hit the road fast enough, they risked being re-enslaved under new laws that were just workarounds for all these white people losing their slaves. After the Civil War ended, Union General Sherman set aside 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land for black families to start new lives on, up to 40 acres each. The Army loaned out mules to help them work the land. That's where the phrase 40 acres and a mule comes from. Black people were already working some of this land when Lincoln was assassinated and Andrew Johnson became president. Well, Johnson reversed the order. He gave the land back to the same Confederates who had just tried to destroy the country. The freed people were evicted. So they made all these things into crimes that were non-crimes. They were things like, if a black person didn't have a job, that was a crime. If a black person couldn't prove that they had a job, that was a crime. You could get arrested for that and a lot of other ridiculous things. But once you were in jail, you could be leased out as labor for private profit. This system of convict leasing allowed white landowners and businesses to replace slavery with something just as violent, just as profitable as slavery. No wonder there are still Confederate flags all across the South. Even after slavery was abolished, Black Americans were not safe. Public lynchings became a regular threat. They were a form of terror used to keep freed people in their place. They were planned events, announced in advance so everybody could attend. They were held in broad daylight. White families brought their children to watch black people being hanged, tortured, brutally murdered. It was a festival. People sold food. There were postcards made. People could buy postcards of the mutilated bodies hanging from trees and mail them in the mail or keep them as souvenirs. This country took care of Civil War criminals and punished the ones the war was supposed to free. And there was a lot more abuse I just can't fit into this video. Next time I'm going to talk about the stuff that happened in relation to the Great Depression and World War II. And then after that, I'll have one on civil rights, the era when I was growing up, how it all ties in to the racism that is part and parcel of our grand land today. White people, you especially need to get curious. Join me in this research, and you'll find that people are willing and able to come in with their education and their experience to help you learn. You just have to be open to it. We need to be willing to be uncomfortable.
You guys have any questions before we move on? Anything you want to chat about? No, we good? Yes, sir?
Do you think that reparations should just go to one group, or should it target people that are in the same kind of socioeconomic group? Because
that's an interesting question. What do you mean by that?
there are white people that have been disenfranchised recently.
Recently is the key. Recently is the key.
The country deindustrialized, right? So a lot of people in manufacturing jobs and stuff.
Right.
Barriers were affected.
But so to your question, I think you have to understand what the word reparations means first. So reparations, you are repairing something that you have broken. You are paying for something that you were supposed to pay for. I'm not saying that there aren't people living in America today who are suffering and are going through pain and strife because of what's happening when it comes to machines taking jobs, factories becoming industrialized, etc. But reparations is a specific conversation about a specific time in America, and that is black people were slaves. You know what I mean? I've even heard people say oh, but there were some of the Irish who were indentured. Yeah, slavery. Look at the numbers, look at the time, look at the level of work. You could not work toward your freedom. For most black people in America, this was a time when you lived and died as a slave. And so that's what reparations is about. And so I hear what you're saying, but I think that's a completely separate conversation that needs to be had about the now. Because if you are not careful, what you then do is you combine everybody's suffering into the same bowl, and you make it seem like all injustices have the same weighting, and they don't. Just like crimes. You know, theft isn't the same as murder. We don't try them the same way. And as much as there is a white person who's suffering today, I feel for anybody who's suffering, because I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to suffer. I didn't come from a wealthy family. We struggled when I was growing up. But I also understand that there are levels of that suffering. You know, and so sometimes white people, it does block a white person, because you go, white privilege, and a person goes, I'm poor and I'm white. Where's the privilege? You know, white people are like, I wish I could activate my white privilege. I wish I could do it right now. White privilege! Give me something. I get that. I get that. Trust me, I get it. It is hard to accept that you have benefits because of the color of your skin if you cannot see the benefits that you have. But the thing I try to explain to a person is, think of it more like golf. Don't think of it as privilege, then think of it like a handicap. Right? In golf, they acknowledge that you are in a position where you need so many advantages to be competitive in the game. Right? So what they say is you have a handicap of 15, so that means like you're going to be hitting from this tee and you get more chances to get the ball in, because we understand the position you're in. And if you're a black person in America, from slavery, from day one, the number of injustices that have held black people back in America amount to an insurmountable, like you look at black people's freedom, you look at black people's land, just land alone. The amount of wealth you can acquire over time if you own land is exponential, because you have the land, you have the fact that you can borrow based on the land, you have the fact that you can use the money that you have borrowed to grow more wealth, you can use it to grow your family's wealth. Just taking that away from black people alone is crippling them. And so you combine that with slavery, and then you look at Jim Crow laws. You didn't let black people in America live in the areas that they wanted to live in. They couldn't get loans from the banks that they wanted to get loans from. And then on top of that, when they started getting the loans from American banks were found to be giving them higher interest rates, when in fact they were the same risk as many of the other races that they were giving loans to. So when you combine all of those things, I think it's safe to say that black Americans have a conversation that they need to be having with the United States. Doesn't involve me, doesn't involve white people, it's like, yo, American government, meet the black people. That's it. Have that conversation.